I remember the cold marble of the church floor under my shoes more than I remember the hymns. My grandmother had been gone for less than a week, and yet the family already circled like hawks. Grief is supposed to quiet people. In my family, it only sharpened their tongues. We had gathered in the side room after the service. The lawyer set a leather folder on the table, the kind with a notary stamp pressed deep into the corner. That folder contained the estate, an estate worth $2.0 million down to the penny. My hands shook when I reached for it, not because of greed, but because my grandmother had trusted me with more than walls and land. She trusted me with the life she had built brick by brick. It was Alex, my cousin, who broke the silence first. He leaned back in his chair, his tie already loosened, though the service had ended only minutes earlier. He smirked and said loud enough for the room to hear, "Half of that estate is mine. Sign the paper, loser." The word loser landed heavier than the bells that had tolled for my grandmother. I tightened my grip on the folder until the edge cut into my palm. No one gasped, no one defended me. A few cousins exchanged glances and then looked away. That is how betrayal often begins, not with daggers, but with silence. I sat very still. In that stillness, loneliness crept in. I thought of the many evenings when I called my grandmother after lectures at the university, her voice carrying me through the fatigue of grading essays. She never once called me a loser. She used words like steady, bright, patient. Yet here I was surrounded by blood relatives who saw me as an obstacle, not kin. The dinner that followed was loud. Glasses clinked, laughter rose in the air, and the smell of roasted lamb filled the hall. I sat with a plate cooling in front of me, invisible. Aunts brushed past without speaking. Uncles toasted to new beginnings without including my name. I pressed the folder tighter against my chest as though someone might snatch it away. It is strange how quickly joy can turn false. Smiles were painted on voices, carried false cheer, yet under every word was hunger. I saw it in the way Alex's mother eyed the keys the lawyer had left on the table. Keys to the house, to the land, to the future. No one spoke of love or loss or memory, only what could be divided. Inside, I felt the anger building like a kettle left too long on the stove, but I swallowed it the way I always had. You learn early in families like mine that speaking too soon is a mistake. Better to let them believe you weak, better to listen, to watch, and to plan. That night, as I walked out into the cold air, Alex brushed past me. He whispered just loud enough, "You won't last. We'll take what's ours." His breath smelled of wine. His words smelled of arrogance. I made no reply. Some battles are not fought in whispers. They are fought in daylight. But what they didn't know was this insult spoken at a funeral have a way of echoing. I carried those words with me heavier than the coffin we had buried, and soon enough those words would turn into their undoing. Tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Families and money, they always teach us something. And I'll explain later how this small insult grew into something far larger. The week after the funeral, I thought silence might return. Funerals, after all, should cool tempers, not ignite them. But in my family, grief was only a curtain. Behind it, ambition rattled like chains. There was a dinner held at my aunt's house the following Saturday. You might expect candles, photographs, and prayers for the woman we had lost. Instead, the house buzzed like a holiday party. Wine bottles lined the counter, music played, and laughter came from every room. If a stranger had walked in, they might have thought we were celebrating a wedding, not mourning a matriarch. I sat near the corner of the dining table, my plate of roast untouched. My eyes drifted to the glowing screen of my phone, messages piling in, but not one from the people sitting beside me. Everyone else leaned close to Alex. He was showing photos from his phone, grinning, as if he had already won a prize. When I finally looked, I saw it clearly. On his social feed, he had posted a photo of the estate's front gates. The caption read, "Finally secured the mansion life." Over 200 likes poured in within hours. Friends commented, congratulating him, assuming he had inherited the place. Not one word of correction from anyone in the room. My grandmother's home, my grandmother's trust already claimed by another, before the ink had even dried. I excused myself and walked to the hallway. That is when my phone buzzed again, not with Alex's boasts, but with a forward from a distant cousin. A screenshot of the family group chat. My name stood there, typed out in cruel certainty. Morgan owes us loyalty. That house is family property. My hands trembled as I read. Someone had leaked it beyond the circle. Cousins, neighbors, friends of friends now saw the words. By morning, whispers had turned to gossip. By night, gossip had turned into judgment. I went back into the dining room. Laughter spilled around me like a tide, but I felt no warmth. Alex raised his glass, boasting about future plans, renovations, parties, even a swimming pool to modernize the old place. He never once looked at me as he spoke. He didn't need to. His words were aimed like arrows, landing all the same. I looked around that crowded room and realized something simple. I was alone in a house filled with family. That is a deeper loneliness than any empty apartment could offer. It is one thing to sit by yourself in silence. It is another to sit in noise and feel invisible. I pressed my fingers against the folder in my bag, the one with the notary stamp still shining. That folder was my shield. But a shield does not stop whispers, nor does it stop betrayal. It only buys time. And time was what I needed. Because what they didn't know was that every boast, every post, every leaked message would serve me later. The louder they bragged, the clearer their greed became. And in families like mine, greed is the loudest witness of all. By the third week after the funeral, the family's tone had shifted from whispers to demands. I had known it would happen. Greed never stays quiet for long. Alex arrived at my apartment one rainy evening. He didn't bother with small talk. He stepped inside with the arrogance of someone walking into a property he already owned. Under his arm, he carried a folder thinner than mine, but heavy with intention. He sat at my kitchen table, water dripping from his coat onto the wood. Without waiting for me to offer, he spread out a set of papers. The words property agreement were typed across the top. His voice was calm, almost smug, as he said, "This makes it easier for everyone. You sign here, and the estate is shared. Family harmony restored." I stared at the black ink, the blank signature line, the pen he slid across the table. My grandmother's handwriting would never appear on these pages. Only mine could, and with it, the weight of betrayal. I asked him why he thought this was right. He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Because you can't handle it. You don't deserve it. I'll take care of things. You'll thank me later." The insult was sharp, but I did not flinch. Years of being dismissed had taught me the value of stillness. I let the silence stretch until it felt like a wall between us. Then I pushed the papers back toward him. "I will not sign." His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He stood gathering the folder, his eyes hard. "You'll regret this. The family already agrees it's only you standing in the way. Think about that." Then he left, slamming the door behind him. I sat alone with the echo of his words. The rain tapped against the window. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. Betrayal had finally stepped out of the shadows and laid itself bare on my table. That night I opened my grandmother's folder once more. Inside were not just deeds and titles, but notes she had written in her careful script, reminders about taxes, letters to the lawyer, even a grocery list folded between pages. Every mark of her hand reminded me she had chosen me. Not Alex. Not anyone else. Me. I knew then that I could not wait for fairness to appear. Families like mine did not deal in fairness. They dealt in appearances, in control and intimidation. So I began to gather more than papers. I began to gather proof. Every boast Alex posted online, every message forwarded my way, every slip of arrogance he left in his trail. I collected them quietly, one by one. What they didn't know was that I had already spoken with my own lawyer, discreetly, carefully. He advised me to hold steady, to document, to prepare. "Let them talk," he said. "Their words will build the case for you." So I waited. I smiled when I saw them at dinners. I nodded when they spoke of our estate, and I let them believe I was cornered. But in truth, I was setting the board for a different kind of game. Because betrayal once exposed is a powerful tool, and I intended to use it. December brought snow, and with it the first family gathering since the funeral that felt more like a stage than a supper. My aunt called it a holiday dinner, but the decorations were half-hearted. The tree stood lopsided in the corner, and the lights blinked as if even the bulbs were weary. The real sparkle came from the greed in their eyes. I arrived with the folder tucked into my bag, the notary stamp catching light whenever I glanced at it. I had learned by then that it was not just paper, it was armor. The dining room was long and narrow, filled with chatter and the clink of glasses. Candles burned down the middle of the table, their wax running like melted time. I took a seat near the end, but Alex made certain his chair was in the center where everyone could hear him. Halfway through the meal, as roast turkey and wine passed around, he cleared his throat. He tapped his glass like a groom about to make a toast. "Tonight," he announced, smiling broadly, "we celebrate not just the season but our future. Morgan will sign the agreement, and together we will enjoy the estate as a family should." Laughter rippled. Forks clattered against plates. Heads nodded, some with relief, others with expectation. My fork remained still. I looked down the table at him. He was already raising his glass, savoring the applause. No more delay, he continued. By the new year, the house will be ours. Parties, renovations, even a pool. We'll bring it into the modern age. I felt eyes turning toward me, waiting for my nod. Instead, I asked softly, "When did I say I would sign?" The room fell quiet for a moment. Alex chuckled, though the sound was brittle. "Come now. Everyone knows it's inevitable. You can't handle a property of that size. You can't even handle being part of this family without causing trouble." His mother added, "Be sensible, Morgan. Don't embarrass us tonight." The word embarrass cut deeper than I expected, not because it was harsh, but because it carried the weight of years, years of being the quiet one, the steady one, the one overlooked until property was at stake. And then came the moment that burned itself into my memory. Alex pointed his finger at me across the table and said, "You're nothing without this estate." Gasps rose, then silence. Somewhere down the table, a phone camera clicked. Another guest shifted their seat and angled a lens. In seconds, what was meant as humiliation in private became a performance for the world. I did not raise my voice. I simply laid my napkin on the table and stood. Inside me, the kettle of anger boiled over, but I kept my tone even. "What you have shown tonight," I said, "is not family. It is hunger. And hunger always eats itself." Murmurs rippled. Alex laughed too loudly, trying to cover the crack in his confidence. But the damage was done. Cameras had captured his words. Whispers would carry them farther than he imagined. What they didn't know was that this dinner staged as my surrender had become my evidence. By morning, clips would circulate. By next week, the whispers of greed would roar louder than any toast. And I was ready. The morning after that dinner, I woke to a phone buzzing on the nightstand. Notifications piled up, clips from cousins, snippets from neighbors, even a stranger's comment on a video. Alex's words. "You're nothing without this estate" had found their way to the open air. The very insult meant to weaken me had begun to turn on him. Still, I knew the storm was only beginning. Gossip alone does not shield a person. Proof does. So I prepared. I placed my grandmother's folder on the desk and opened it fully for the first time since the funeral. Inside were pages upon pages, deeds stamped in ink letters, folded carefully, and the will itself. I traced her handwriting where she had written notes in the margins, reminders to herself about taxes and repairs. These were not just documents, they were her voice. When the next gathering came, a larger dinner, meant for distant relatives, I carried that folder like a sword sheathed in leather. The dining hall this time was brighter, fuller with cousins I had not seen in years. Laughter rolled across the room, but beneath it lay expectation. Alex, again at the center, thrived on it. He raised his glass once more, swelling with confidence. "Tonight," he said, "we put aside delays. Morgan has agreed to share the estate. At last, balance will return to the family." Ali spoken as truth. I waited until the wine was poured, until forks scraped plates. Then I stood and placed the folder on the table. The thud silenced the room. Candles flickered in the draft of sudden stillness. "This," I said, opening the cover, "is my grandmother's will. Signed, stamped, witnessed, and filed with her lawyer. She chose her heir without hesitation." I slid the deed forward, the notary stamp catching the light. Nowhere in these pages is Alex's name. Murmurs rose. Alex laughed nervously, waving a hand. "Papers can be forged. Morgan is twisting things. You all know how unstable." I interrupted by pulling out another sheet, an email printout bearing his own words. "This," I said, my voice steady, was forwarded to me. A message from Alex sent to family members. "Morgan owes us loyalty. The house is family property." His plan was not inheritance. His plan was intimidation. The air in the room thickened. Some guests leaned closer. Others sat back in silence. And then the final blow, the lawyer I had contacted entered from the hallway, briefcase in hand. His presence was unplanned for the rest, but not for me. He nodded politely, then addressed the room. "I've reviewed the documents. They are valid. Morgan is the sole heir. Any attempt to pressure or coerce a signature is not only immoral, but illegal." Gasps spread like wind through dry grass. Alex's face reddened. He slammed his hand against the table. "This isn't over. That house should be mine. I've already told everyone." The lawyer adjusted his glasses calmly. "Then you have told them a lie." At that, I reached into the folder once more. This time, I pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table. On here, I said, is footage from the estate's cameras. It shows Alex attempting to enter with a copied key. The silence that followed was heavier than any words spoken that night. What they didn't know was that the moment Alex had touched those locks, his claim had ended. Proof had a way of closing doors he had thought wide open. And I had just turned the key. If Chapter 5 had been a wound, this was the salt poured in. Word of the confrontation spread faster than I could have imagined. Clips of Alex shouting at the table made their way online, stitched with commentary from distant relatives, even strangers who had only heard whispers. The hashtag number, estate drama, climbed until it sat among videos of celebrities and politicians. The following weekend, another gathering was arranged not by me, but by those desperate to mend what was already broken. My uncle insisted on a civil conversation, though I knew civility had left us the moment Alex pointed his finger at me. Still I went. Sometimes you must walk willingly into the storm to show you are not afraid of rain. We sat again around a long table, though this time the mood was fractured. Some relatives refused eye contact, others whispered behind napkins. Cameras were present, phones set on laps, lenses pointed discreetly. The air hummed with expectation. Alex lasted only minutes before he erupted. His voice cracked through the room. This house should be mine. I deserve it more than Morgan ever will. The words did not shock me anymore. They rolled off like water against stone. But the silence that followed was new. Not one person applauded him. Not one glass was raised. He stood alone in his fury. I set my fork down gently, then met his eyes. Deserve? My voice was calm, deliberate. You tried to steal. There is no deserving in theft. Gasps scattered like sparks. A few phones lifted higher, catching every syllable. Alex's jaw tightened, his face flushing red. He shouted again, incoherent fragments of anger, but each word only hung heavier. My aunt reached for his arm, whispering, "Sit down." He shoved her hand away. His desperation had outgrown his dignity. That was the moment when I realized revenge does not always require action. Sometimes humiliation once lit burns on its own. One cousin whispered loud enough for others to hear, "It's true, Morgan never lied." Another leaned back, shaking his head, murmuring, "Unbelievable." Each voice chipped away at Alex's authority until he stood shouting at a crowd that no longer listened. Then the first livestream notification pinged on my phone. Someone across the table was broadcasting the scene. The comments poured in, strangers weighing in with judgment harsher than anything I could have spoken. Entitled, "Brat. Family Snake. This is disgusting." Alex saw the phone, lunged for it, but was pulled back by two relatives. His cries of, "Delete it, stop recording," only fed the fire. The more he demanded silence, the louder the digital world became. I sat quietly through it all, hands folded, breathing steady. Not a victor's smile, not a vengeful grin, just calm. Because calm in the face of chaos is its own kind of power. What they didn't know was that every view, every share, every cruel comment online stripped Alex of the very thing he wanted most: respect. And without respect, even family ties snap. By the time I rose from the table, his voice was hoarse, his face streaked with anger and shame. The estate was still mine, but more than that, the stage had shifted. No longer was I the quiet heir in the corner. I was the one who had withstood the storm without flinching. And Alex, he had given the world the proof of his own downfall. Humiliation alone might have been enough for some, but not for me. For weeks I had watched my grandmother's home treated like a prize in a raffle, my name dismissed like an afterthought. Revenge, I learned, is not simply retaliation, it is restoration. It is setting the world upright when others have bent it crooked. I called a meeting of my own, not in a crowded dining room, not over clinking glasses and roasted meats, but in the estate itself. I wanted them to see the house they had fought over, not as a trophy, but as a legacy. The snow lay heavy on the roof, the windows glowed with soft light, and inside the air smelled of pine and dust polished clean. They arrived reluctantly, Alex red-eyed and hollow from weeks of whispers, his parents stiff with pride that had soured, a scattering of cousins curious for the next scandal. Phones were kept low but not hidden. I welcomed them with a steady hand and no smile. We gathered in the main hall beneath the portrait of my grandmother that hung above the fireplace. Her eyes seemed to follow us stern, but kind, reminding me of the weight of her trust. I began without flourish. For months I've listened to claims and demands. Tonight I close that chapter. This estate was left to me not because I was the loudest, not because I demanded it, but because I was chosen. And now I choose what becomes of it. Murmurs stirred. Alex scoffed, but I continued. I will not sell this house. I will not divide it into shares. I will not hand it over to those who see it as property alone. Instead, I am creating the Margaret Scholarship Fund, named after the woman who built all of this. The land will remain, the house will remain, but its fruits, its income, its value will serve students who work hard yet lack means. Not $1 will line the pockets of those who sought to strip it for themselves. The silence that followed was like a held breath. Some cousins looked relieved, others stunned. Alex's mother whispered, "You can't do that." I met her eyes. I already have. The papers are signed, the fund is registered, and every attempt to coerce me, every message, every outburst, is documented. If challenged, it will not be my word against yours. It will be fact against noise. Alex's face twisted. He shouted, "You've ruined us. That money was ours." No, I cut in sharply. It was never yours. It was hers. And she trusted me to guard it. That trust outweighs your greed. Phones lifted higher. I could see the red recording lights. This too would travel beyond these walls. But unlike before, it was not Alex directing the play, it was me. For the first time, I felt the weight in my chest ease. Revenge was not slamming a door or raising my voice. It was reclaiming the dignity they had tried to strip away and ensuring their hunger never tasted what they thought belonged to them. As they left one by one, Alex lingered at the door. His voice cracked low, meant only for me. "You'll regret this." I closed the door gently, my reply, just as soft. "Number I've already begun to heal." What they didn't know was that the estate untouched by their hands had become something greater than wealth. It had become a mirror. And in it they saw themselves for who they truly were. A year slipped by, measured not by quarrels or signatures, but by quiet progress. The estate, once the center of contention, became a place of purpose. The house stood as it always had, brick solid against the season's windows, bright with the same golden glow my grandmother loved. But now it held more than memories. It held a promise. The Margaret Scholarship Fund launched that spring. I remember standing at the podium in the estate's main hall, the portrait of my grandmother behind me as I welcomed the first group of students. Their faces shone with the kind of hope money cannot buy. Some came from families with nothing more than determination. Others carried stories of struggle that mirrored my own in unexpected ways. Their gratitude was quiet, their ambition louder. News outlets covered the event. Local papers ran headlines about an heir turning inheritance into opportunity. Clips of students walking the grounds replaced the earlier scandal videos that had once trended online. For once, the estate was not a symbol of greed, but of generosity. As for Alex and his family, the world had not been kind. The viral storm never left them. At grocery stores, whispers followed. At community events, stares lingered. The videos of him shouting, "This house should be mine," still resurfaced every few weeks, attached to new threads about entitlement and family feuds. He tried to scrub them, tried to shout them down, but the internet remembers what people would rather forget. I saw him once, months after it all. He walked past me in town, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. He did not speak, and neither did I. Revenge no longer required words. Life itself had written the final sentence. In the quiet of the estate, I sometimes wander through the garden. The roses bloom in summer, the snow rests heavy in winter, and always the air carries a trace of her, my grandmother, who trusted me enough to carry her legacy. I talk to her sometimes aloud as though she might still be listening. They thought I was weak, I tell her, but money only revealed who they really were. If you think Morgan made the right choice, comment right. If you'd handle it differently, share your idea.